Hello, let me start my presentation. To start with, I would like to express my thank you to the conference organizers for letting me deliver my speech. To begin with, a few words about the very title, Reprogramming Historiographic Foregrounding, Irish Themes in the Early Development of Canadian National Drama. How should we possibly understand this title? So, of course, the very first word, it stems from the title of the conference. Reprogramming, so programming something anew, changing something, showing something in a completely different way, from a completely different perspective. Historiographic, so it refers here to the history of writing, on Canadian drama and theatre. Foregrounding, so to showing something in the foreground, and my task will be to reprogram this foregrounding, so to show something different, to show something so far presented in the background. Irish themes, Irish, not Irish, but different from Irish, in the early development of Canadian national drama or national Canadian drama. So basically, I mean here early developments, the first half of the 20th century, and specifically 1920s, 30s, and 40s. First, please let me explain the aims, the objectives. So the first one, to offer a reconsideration of the mainstream developments in the history of Canadian drama and theatre. That's very important. That's very important because the mainstream developments, they appear in different tables of contents and inside the books. Here I mean books on the history of Canadian drama and theatre. Different histories are frequently showing the same. So frequently showing Irish inspirations is one of the major directions of development of Canadian drama and theatre in the 1920s, 1930s, and 40s. The second aim, to suggest possible interpretations of selected Canadian plays inspired by the abilities of the Irish Literary Revival and the Abbey Theatre at the early stage of its theatrical activity, and I here mean the period just after the official creation of the Abbey in 1904 and the first decade after its creation. To suggest a possible redefinition of dramatic historiography in terms of the development of Canadian drama and theatre in the first half of the 20th century. So this can say my third attempt. In the first one, I just sought to recreate the official direction on the scale of showing the history of Canadian drama and including Irish inspirations. And in the second attempt, I somehow followed the path, and now in the third one, I would like to show a direction completely different from that present in the mainstream histories of Canadian drama and theatre. Origins of research is very important piece of information here. So I decided to somehow split my references into internal and external ones. And internal references are very important because they illustrate a kind of a definition inside my own research. And you see, three important studies created by me so far. So, counter-discourse historical drama on Canadian stage from the ultimate national theatre towards multiculturalism. It took the form of a presentation delivered in 2010 in Krakow. And what is important here is that I sought to illustrate these influences, these inspirations in Canadian drama. And that's why counter-discourses of Irish drama on Canadian stage, that was treated as a kind of fact, important fact. From the ultimate national theatre towards multiculturalism, so it somehow stressed the fact that Irish inspirations were quite important in terms of the early development of Canadian drama. But with time and with the development of post-colonial approaches, for example, it did not apply afterwards. And now you see a very mysterious title. It's in Polish because the book was published originally in Polish in 2012, and the title can be translated as the outline post-colonial history of Canadian drama and theatre. And this book is very important because there was a subchapter inspired by Irish influences. And now the main study I am working on currently, and the working title of the book is Beyond Irish Inspirations: Other Themes in the Canadian Drama 1920s and 1930s. And basically that's what I would like to show in this presentation. My basic questions, basic assumptions, and sometimes underminings of my own previous research as regards the role of Irish inspirations in Canadian drama, bearing in mind the same period which in other studies and in my previous studies, the same period which was treated in terms of the importance of Irish inspirations. Of course, my aim will not be to question such inspirations or to undermine such inspirations, but to somehow change the perspective and to change the foregrounding practices. So to focus on something different, on something new, on something, let's say, other. That's why the title goes other themes. And yes, another very important, or even more important, set of references which I somehow describe as external references. So Canadian theatre history, a huge and massive collection of different theoretical, critical, historical texts, which, at least according to the editor, according to Don Rubin, they somehow shaped, or in fact they have shaped, the vision of Canadian theatre that we have it now. Now, Eugene Benson and L.W. Connolly, Oxford Companion to Canadian Theatre, 1989, is a very important reference source, and specifically one of the entries, Drama in English, contributed by Richard Blount. And Eugene Benson and again L.W. Connolly, English Canadian Theatre. And I would say that's still the only, let's say, kind of comprehensive historical study of Canadian drama history, Canadian drama, history of Canadian drama, and history of Canadian theatre. Please mind the years. So we have 1989, 1987. So well, not, let's say, recent publications, but still having a very important impact on considering Canadian drama and theatre within historical terms. Yes, so the first source, which again I would like to analyze, or in fact reanalyze or re-examine. So yes, 3 chapters or 3 sections: Stirrings of Independence, 1916-1929, Visions and Revisions, 1929-1945, Government Intervention, 1945-1967, and one common feature: they contain articles, essays, reviews, historical texts which treat Canadian drama and theatre in terms of inspirations from Ireland, inspirations given by the Irish Literary Revival and the Abbey Theatre. And of course, the first is very important with William Butler Yeats. Yeats speaks on the theatre. These are not exact words. It's a kind of report of Yeats' words. John Cutler, The Canadian Theatre and the Irish Exemplar. Very crucial title in which we see how such inspirations should work. And finally, John Cutler towards the Canadian theatre. Again, Abbey Theatre and such names as William Butler Yeats, Lady Augusta Gregory or Jamington Singh, they surface in discussion by Cutler. Please have a look at the first source. So Yeats speaks on the theatre. So please read it silently. So first we see Yeats's perspective on Irish theatre, and I can't see any possibility now of somehow appropriating such a perspective and treating Canadian drama within similar terms. Bear in mind specifically mistakes which appear in the report. So please mind the very first line. So as I mentioned, it's a report, but a report submitted by someone who, well, we might think might not have been familiar with the Abbey Theatre and the Irish Revival, because Lady Gregory Singh actually here is one person, but you know, it's not true. It's not true. Please also mind the third quote. So if he had seen the Hard House Theatre before preparing his lecture, he would like to have talked of what it was possible of doing for the drama in Canada. The answer is not given. The answer is not given here. Okay, and I've included this text in my free studies, but treating it right in a different way in each. Now please have a look at the second source again. Right? Please read it silently. John Cutler, and he actually had Irish roots, and I mean here Northern Irish roots, and we see that there is some attempt to somehow adapt appropriate his experience, his Irish experience, and to make it part of Canadian theatre. But of course, my best wish for the theatre in Canada is not to its other excellences. It should add a few playwrights, writers of integrity and vision. Integrity, vision, and well, very general, abstract notions, which here come from the text about the possible Irish influences in Canadian drama theatre, but the words I quoted, actually, they are too universal. So I would say that even in the very arguments given by Coulter, somehow this Irish inspiration goes beyond. So it is not actually Irish here. That's my point here. And now please have a look at the next quote. And again, well, some logical fallacy, right, in this thinking. So, could in time make the plays of the Canadian theatre not only of importance to Canada, but of universal significance. Universal significance, again, goes beyond national or cross-national inspirations. And next source. Yes, we have the Oxford Companion to Canadian Theatre and the entry called Drama in English, contributed by Richard Blunt. And it comes from the section, the First World War to the 30s. So Ireland's Abbey Theatre was seen as an almost perfect model of a theatre dedicated to new dramaturgy and national expression was seen as an almost perfect model. Now, the question is, what goes beyond? Should we analyze the plays created in the period described by Blunt only in terms of this perfect model? Because I would say no, I would say that we should rather focus on what Coulter refers to as universal dimensions of the plays created at the time. And yes, the final external reference source and a few quotes demonstrating the importance of Irish theatre in the mainstream historiographical development of Canadian drama and theatre. So please read the quote silently. And again, we see direct inspirations, direct references to the Abbey Theatre and to specific names like Yeats and Gregory. And yes, the text is, I would say, the most essential in terms of historiographical studies of Canadian drama and theatre, in which Irish inspirations play a very important role. And a few words about the way I treated Irish inspirations in the book written in 2012, so an online history of postcolonial Canadian drama and theatre, and how these changed now in beyond Irish inspirations, other themes in Canadian drama of the 1920s and 1930s. So The section I included was Irish model for development of drama and theatre in Canada. So see inspirations from John Coulter here, and I focused in the section on such themes and aspects as histories of Canadian drama and theatre, individual critics and playwrights. So yes, John Coulter, William Butler Yeats, and Mary Dennison, and the functioning of the hard house theatre, which according to some scholars could have been inspired by the way the Abbey Theatre functioned. Yes. Now let me move on to the very plays which I would like to share. So The House of the Quiet Glen by John Coulter, said to be his Irish play, but I don't think it's an Irish play actually. Coming from 1937 and staged in Canada. So yes, please read descriptions of the opening stage directions. Okay, yes. So when considering the quote, I thought of the possible questions which would be asked when endeavoring to interpret the work. So the location is explained and specified in the opening stage directions, which we see it's Irish, right, and explained, right, but yet can the glen be treated in more universal and timeless dimensions? I would say yes. Can the setting be bracketed? Bracket here, I mean the term according to phenomenology, so somehow to put the setting aside, to foreground the possible Canadian elements. Can the play be appropriated and adapted to match the Canadian setting? And can the setting be reinscribed, for example, in postcolonial renditions of the original work? What universal un-Irish themes and messages does the play convey? Do these surface in the text? Do they need to be foregrounded? And is it essential that they should be foregrounded? These are the questions which I would like to ask when searching for other themes and other dimensions of this work, of this play. Again, the quote from the same text, so please read it silently. Okay, so the plot line in just one sentence. So Sally and Hughie are in love, yet parents want her to marry Hughie's father. Now, should the plotline be treated in terms of Irish, Canadian, or universal dimensions? Which hermeneutic dangers implies each option? I would say that for me it's universal dimension, and it's a kind of universal dimension common in different dramatic manifestations at the time. Stereotype, stock characters, conventional theme of misunderstanding, and a happy resolution at the end. That's more or less the conflict and the structure of the whole work. Can spatial and temporal frames of the play be bracketed? Again, I would say yes. And here, this play can be perfectly interpreted beyond Irish inspirations. And another quote. And still, possible questions in interpretation. So, how can the situation depicted by Sally's mother be moved to the context in which the play was staged? I mean, the Canadian context. So, how about social conventions and expectations in Canada at the time? Yes, so we have a completely, let's say, external setting, but do these social conventions exist at the time it was presented? How about the distance between the characters and the audience? And how about the clan? Can it be appropriate? So can it be somehow made Canadian in this way? Yes. And two other plays will come from this source. Brothers in Arms by Murray Dennison, 1921. The play staged at Harthouse Theatre. So please read silently descriptions presented in the opening stage directions. Sorry for this part, you can't see it right, but at least I guess you can decipher the meaning from the context. Okay. Now possible questions in the interpretation. So the play is set in a Canadian location and within specific time frames. That's clear. In common historiography of Canadian drama and theatre, the play is often considered within the inspirations from Irish drama and theatre. So we have Harthouse Theatre, William Butler Yeats visiting Harthouse Theatre, and the critics and playwrights associated with Harthouse Theatre, inspired by Irish drama and theatre. Now the question, so is such historiography fair and helps to explore the senses inside the play? So does it help to explore the senses inside the play? I would say no. I would say that here it should be treated as a Canadian play or as a not, let's say, general Canadian play, but the play dealing with the specific time frames and this particular location, because Canada is characterized by vastness and multitude in terms of spaces, in terms of geography, cultures. I would say that here we should be specific in interpreting this play to avoid any general statements. It was originally produced at Harthouse Theatre in Toronto, and Harthouse is often described in terms of the influence of the Abbey Theatre. Thus, the description facilitates the reception of the play nowadays. I would say, to some extent, of course, we cannot undermine fact here, but still, we should not make it foregrounded. We should rather treat it as a background, but not somehow totalizing and influencing the senses, surfacing and hidden the work. The play has very rich references to Canada and its status within the British Empire. In the context of the Great War, we have Canadian soldiers and World War, Toronto, yet it was staged at Harthouse Theatre, treated historiographically in terms of Irish inspirations. Should such references be bracketed? I would say yes. I would say yes. If you want to draw new sense, if you want to somehow show the other aspects hidden in this text, I would say that such historiographical understanding should be bracketed. Okay, we have now Brothers in Arms by Murray Dennison, so the same work, and passage illustrating dialogue between Dorothy and Mr. Brown, married couple. So please read it silently. Okay. And some questions that could be asked. So the dialogue cannot be treated within the general context of the Irish inspirations in Canadian drama and theatre at the time of the original production of the play. Canada is considered as the other, which undermines the original poetics of the Abbey Theatre. Thus, treating the play as an example of one of the main historiographic trends would lead to paradoxes and thematic conflicts. Thus, set of my arguments, my points. So the questions, of course, are related to specific situation, specific conflict, context presented in that work, not for focusing on on the background and on distant Irish inspirations. And the third work. So we've overlaid Robertson Davies, 1948. Maybe let me read this. The scene is a farmhouse kitchen in rural Canada. It is a cluttered and inconvenient room containing a wood range, dresser, kitchen table, a radio, several chairs. There is a door leading to the farmyard, another to the house. A light cord fitted with a double socket hangs nakedly from the ceiling. A basket of unironed clothes sits on the table. An ironing board and electric iron are in the corner and on the top of the range respectively. Yes, so, well, maybe you would disagree, I don't know, but I would say that the reader familiar with role play staged at the Abbey Theatre at the beginning of the 20th century, introductory description of the setting in the play by Davies may evoke. Thinking in comparative terms, searching Irish inspirations in terms of biographical studies, I mean here biography of the playwright, for example, and more general context. Such inspirations in terms of historiographical considerations at that time. How about bracketing the above mentioned aspects? Because without the knowledge of, let's say, the Irish inspirations, the reader might come to different senses and might interpret the work in a different way. So these comparative aspect will not be taken into account, perhaps. Yes, and finally, as a kind of conclusion, so some general challenges which I'm encountering during my research and focusing on other aspects present in Canadian drama, created in the period which, according to the mainstream historiographical developments, should be based on Irish inspiration. So, does such bracketing of Irish aspects make sense? I believe yes. But we'll see and wait till the final results come out. What new meanings can such a perspective contribute to the development of knowledge on the history of Canadian drama and theatre? Is deconstructive reading of the historiography of Canadian drama and theatre worth the effort? Inspirations drawn from the Abbey Theatre and the Irish Literary Revivalists have proved inadequate in the attempt at creating national Canadian drama in the theatre in the 1950s and onwards. And that's what I demonstrated in the first presentation given on this topic in 2010. But now I see that the very idea of unanimous dramaturgy in the case of Canada has been undermined, and not only in kind of recent developments. I would say that this assumption and this process of, let's say, seeing beyond Irish inspirations should be examined in the period in which, according to the mainstream historiographical criticism, the period in which such influences took place. So the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. So that's why I'm re-examining once again the texts which, on the one hand, sought to show such inspirations, but somehow subconsciously and deconstructively they undermine such influences at the same time. Thank you very much. And if you'd like to suggest, for example, something for my research, please contact me using the email address given here. So once again, thank you very much for listening to me, and I do apologize for any mistakes or any problems during this presentation. Recording was a new experience. And once again, thank you very much, and yes, and please somehow take in these very difficult times. Thank you.